The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is a one-sided love story between a rich old Saudi man and a beautiful poor Indian girl. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. It is a romantic tale that was narrated in 6 books. Book 1. The Arab Sugar Daddy falls in love with a beautiful Indian girl. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from the review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 30. Rayhana creates her personal underground bank. When the beautiful Indian Layla, known as the maid Rayhana Khan, met the so-called black Negro boy Babakar Alawar 2 days later in the restaurant, he brought her some good news. He informed her that her old Arab sponsor, Sugar Daddy, had sent the 2 visas and 2 travel tickets to his address. He also added that their passports would soon be mailed to the address of her cousin who lives in a shack in a slum area near the western suburb of Lokhandwala Andheri. Her cousin Jamal Khan's address reminded her that their passports might go to the wrong address and reach other people, namely the obese Hindu woman and her tall, thin Indian husband. She expected that the Hindu family that bought her lover's family's hut would destroy the 2 passports if they saw that they were addressed to Muslim people. To avoid such a disastrous ending, she told Babakar that she learned that her beloved cousin had recently died of the coronavirus and that his widowed wife had sold the hut to a Hindu family and moved to another poor area. The Sudanese student became angry with her when she told him this news, and she did not take it upon herself to go to the passport office at Worli and give them a new, valid address. The Indian maid, Rayhana, told him that she did not have any other address because she lived in a poor hut in Dharavi that had no address. The foreign student Babakar has been living in India for a long time, but he had never heard in his life that a citizen of a country could be without an address. In his country, even farm animals and domestic animals such as dogs, cows, donkeys, and horses have addresses. However, after Babakar got over the shock, he gave Rayhana his new address and asked her to go and deliver it to the passport office before they sent their passports to the wrong address. After being fired from work by the wife of imprisoned Lucifer Muhammad Shaitan Khan, the African boy Babakar was also expelled from his hostel for foreign students because he could not pay his university boarding fees. Then he went to some old Sudanese friends in the Vakola area and began living with them in their apartment without paying his share of the rent. Rayhana asked Babakar to go with her to the passport office, but he apologized and said that he could not go with her this time because he had to study in preparation for his final exams. He told her that he wouldn't be able to go anywhere for a week because final exams were coming up. He then told her that she could go alone to the passport office and talk to the same employee whom he had previously bribed and paid 1,000 rupees to change her address. Rayhana would rather wait a year to get her and her daughter's passports than give someone a huge amount of money as much as 1,000 rupees. With 1,000 rupees, she can feed her 6 children and her elderly mother for 6 months. She earns just 300 rupees a month working as a slave for several rich families from sunrise to sunset, 7 days a week. She even works during public holidays. In India, some poor people can survive for many years on dal and rice, lentils and rice. Dal and rice are the staple daily diet of the majority of people in the Indian subcontinent. Since the day the Sudanese foreign student Babakar gave the Indian maidservant Rayhana her share of the money her benefactor had generously sent her, the sugar daddy, she has not spent more than 100 rupees out of the 10,000 rupees she received. She is very grateful and believes that there must be a lot of money on the streets of Saudi Arabia and that this is just a drop in the bucket. Soon she will be able to collect all the foreign currencies and snatch them from the streets of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and all her suffering, misery, and fears for her needy family will disappear. Since she had never received such a huge amount of money in her entire life, Rayhana made sure to protect it with her 10 fingers and sharp teeth and spend it wisely rather than losing it all at once. On the same day, she went to the restroom of the restaurant after Babakar handed her the money. Then she took off all her clothes, including her swimsuit-like underwear and her bra, and became completely naked, just as her mother had given birth to her. Then she tore a long piece of fabric from her Indian sari and made something like a belt out of it. But not a suicide belt with an explosive device, as she was wrongly accused of being a Muslim suicide bomber who was supposed to blow up an Air India plane on its flight midway between Bombay and Jeddah. She then tied up Indian currency notes and wrapped the money belt around her genitals between her hairy pussy and naked big buttocks as if it were an adult diaper. Then she put on her small swimsuit-like underwear over it, then put on her other clothes and left the restaurant's restroom. She did not change her underwear or take off her outer clothing for 2 days except when she needed to go to the public toilet to urinate and defecate. As mentioned earlier, she does not have a toilet inside her small hut and has to go to the public slums toilet. She is afraid that someone will see through her underwear and find out that she has a secret treasure wrapped around her hairy pussy and big ass and kill her for thousands of rupees. Rayhana is also afraid to go to the bank because the banking department might accuse her of stealing 10,000 rupees from one of her wealthy employers. Then the bank manager will call in some evil Hindu police officers to arrest her and then gang rape her inside the interrogation room like they did to her before. In addition, she has no address to give the bank. She had never saved more than 400 rupees from all her hard work serving the rich and naively believed that this amount would buy her a work visa and a plane ticket to a rich Arab country. That day, one of her compatriots mocked her and told her that 400 rupees could not take her in a taxi to Bombay International Airport. Incidentally, the cheapest labor rate in the world is in India. There is no such thing as minimum wage in this country where the majority of its citizens live below the poverty level. When the beautiful and sexy maid Rayhana Khan got tired of hiding her treasure around her genitals under her swimsuit-like underwear between her hairy pussy and her big ass, she decided to start her own bank. On the third night, while her mother, her 6 children, and all her slum neighbors were asleep, she woke up like a thief in the middle of the night, took her cooking knife, and dug a hole in one corner of her little hut. Then she removed the money belt carefully hidden in her private parts and buried it in the hole like a cat burying its feces. Whenever she needed some money, she would wake up in the middle of the night, open her underground bank, and take out the rupees she needed. When she went to change her address at the passport office the next morning, Rayhana Khan had only 100 rupees in her pocket. When the passport officer started creating problems for her by asking unnecessary questions, she gave him 20 rupees, and he immediately changed her address while she was still standing in front of him. Her cousin Jamal's address was crossed out and Babakar's address was written down. After feeling satisfied with what the money could buy, she left the passport office to return to her poor hut. She did not have to buy a train ticket because she was a slum dweller, and by order of the Indian government, they were exempted from paying train tickets or bus fares, so they could ride and travel for free. The beautiful girlfriend Rayhana Khan did not buy a local train ticket even during the 3 weeks she spent with her missing handsome lover Jamal Khan, who remained behind lock and key. She always rode in the crowded ladies' cabin and traveled wherever she wanted to go. Thank God, women in Bombay are allowed 2 separate sections in local trains. If a beautiful young woman like Rayhana dared to enter the men's compartment of a local train, she would be grabbed by hundreds of sexually frustrated men and gang-raped in broad daylight in front of everyone inside the jam-packed carriage. Women in Bombay often suffer sexual harassment as well while traveling on local bus routes because there are no designated sections just for them. In some other major cities in India, such as New Delhi, Madras, and Calcutta, local transport buses often offer reserved seats for the benefit of women travelers. Women travel by local train, although they are allowed to travel in any of the 10 sections of the men's section. Men are not allowed to enter either of the 2 women's compartments. On the other hand, there are people in Bombay who are neither males nor females. They are called number 6. I have no idea what this number stands for. They are also neither gays nor lesbians. These citizens of both sexes are allowed to travel in local trains compartments designated for women as they do not pose any threat to female passengers. They live by begging because no one will give them jobs. If they come and ask you for money as charity or alms and you refuse to give them anything, they will curse you in your face. Many people in India believe that their curses will come true. If you give them money, they will bless you. Muhammad Khan was also informed by one of his spies of the second visit of the maid Rayhana Khan to the passport office. The information revealed that Rayhana Khan changed the address of her hut, which was previously the address of Jamal Khan's Chal hut. The spy even provided the new address to the Satan incarnate. When he carefully wrote the new address, Muhammad Khan was astonished. Surprisingly, it is not the address of a hut or shawl, but of an apartment in the Vakola area. Initially, Muhammad Khan thought the wealthy sugar daddy Sheikh Ahmed had moved the lovely maid Rayhana from her slum in Dharavi to an apartment in Vakola. He decided to send someone to find out who lived in the apartment building. Then Muhammad Khan sent his concierge and asked him to go and ask the neighbors about the person staying at that address. When the messenger returned, he brought with him information that was truly confusing. The evil boss couldn't get a clear picture in his head. The concierge who was sent by him said that he learned from the neighbors that 5 foreign students living in the apartment that was under investigation. The information did not reveal their names, nationalities, enrollment in university faculties, or field of study. It was also not possible to confirm the nature of their daily activities. They are all male, and there is not a single female among them. Therefore, Muhammad Khan contacted some Muslims of Gundas of Vakola and asked them to provide him with more detailed information about the foreign students living in that apartment. Shortly after, these thugs brought to the devil's advocate Muhammad Satan Khan the names, nationalities, and colleges of the 5 foreign students. The Avenger and evil warlock immediately cleared up the mind-boggling mystery, and suddenly everything started making sense to him. Sheikh Ahmed is still in the picture and is using the dreaded black Negro slave Babakar Hussain Osama and not Jamal Khan to prepare travel papers for the Kalaba prostitute and slum maid Rayhana Khan. His evil mind worked quickly and hatched a devious plot to stop this collaboration in its tracks. He thought of 3 ways to prevent the Indian maidservant, the so-called Kalaba prostitute, Rayhana Khan, from traveling to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and to punish the Sudanese foreign student, the so-called accursed black Negro slave, Babakar Alawar, who helps her fly to her Arab sponsor, sugar daddy, the wealthy Sheikh Ahmed. The devil incarnate, Muhammad Khan, planned to create a problem for her at the passport office and the international airport and carry out this malicious plot by accusing the Sudanese foreign student, Babakar Alawar, of some illegal activities, which could lead to him being sent behind bars and imprisoned forever and preventing the exit of the beautiful and sexy maid, Rayhana Khan, at the Bombay International. However, the apartment where Babakar now lives is rented by 4 Sudanese students. The 4 Sudanese students and the countrymen allowed Babakar to stay with them for humanitarian reasons and because he is a Sudanese foreign student like them. Babakar was unable to participate in paying the rent for the apartment because he had no source of income, so his countrymen allowed him to stay with them for free for charitable reasons. After the wife of his former boss kicked him out of the agency, he became destitute again. Babakar is another spendthrift employee, and he is not a wise person like the strong-willed girl Nafisa Khan. Whatever money he earned while working at the travel agency, he spent it on his selfish Indian girlfriend who was not beautiful at all, Jamila, ugly, vile. So, soon after losing his job, he began to depend on the kindness of his Sudanese friends again. All 5 of these Sudanese students have girlfriends. One of the boys has a Kenyan girlfriend, another has an Ethiopian miss, another is a Palestinian girl, another is a young woman from South Sudan, and the 5th one has an ugly Indian girlfriend whom he loves, but she does not love him. The last girlfriend is the ugly Indian girl Jamila Malik, who is the sister-in-law of Lucifer Muhammad Satan Khan. By the way, the ugly girl, Jamila, did not break off her relationship with the so-called accursed black Negro, the Sudanese student, Babakar Alawar, after he was expelled from the Muhammad Khan Travel and Tourism Agency. For a time, She avoided talking to the so-called ugly one-eyed black Negro whenever she saw him. However, one day he stopped her and told her something, which prompted her to agree to meet him again. She meets him the next day after work and agrees to what amounts to a last-ditch effort to propose marriage to a reckless love puppy. Babakar told her that after 6 months he would go to Saudi Arabia to work as an English-Arabic translator for the wealthy businessman Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. He showed her a letter he had received from his future sponsor proving that the lucrative job offer was real. It is one of the deals that the old Arab man, Sugar Daddy, made with the Sudanese student, Babakar Alawar, when he asked him to find his beautiful Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, at any cost and return her to where she belongs, with him in one of his 3 palaces in the Kingdom of Tartarus, Saudi Arabia. For those who are not familiar with the Holy Bible, Tartarus is the name of hell. When the black African foreign student, Babakar Alawaz, told his ugly Indian friend that he would work as a translator in the rich Saudi Arabian country with the wealthy businessman Sheikh Ahmed, being a selfish girl, Jamila agreed to marry him. Albeit with some necessary conditions, Babakar must arrive there first, then return after a year, marry her, and take her to that Arab paradise, which is the promised land for every Indian man and woman, the land that overflows with money and honey. Some Indians sold their homes and body parts to get enough money to buy entry visas to take them to oil-rich Arab countries or immigrate to Canada or Australia. This miraculous consent of an Indian girl to a black African boy made the Sudanese lover, the crazy one-eyed Babakar, feel extremely happy when he heard that the ugly Indian Jamila had finally accepted that he would be considered a human being like her, who had the same dignity, and that she would marry him as her future Muslim husband. This type of beneficial marital union is common in India. Many foreign students marry Indian girls in a kind of, how will I benefit and how will my family benefit from this type of socially and ethnically unacceptable marriage? There was a case in New Delhi of a black Sudanese student who was in love with a white Indian girl. The lover is a foreign student studying at the University of Delhi, and his Indian lover is a nurse in a large hospital in the capital of India. Her family initially rejected his proposal to marry their daughter because to them he was just a coal-black Negro. However, after learning of his refugee status and that he would soon be sent for resettlement to Vancouver, Canada, and given an immigrant visa, they agreed to the marriage. However, behind his back, they convinced their daughter to marry him on one condition. The Sudanese boy did not know the secret agreement between his girlfriend and her parents until he married her and took her as his bride to Canada. A month after their arrival in the Promised Land, the Indian wife moved out of his apartment, found a job, and rented her apartment. She then began applying for immigration papers for her parents. Her Sudanese husband could not do anything for her. This was worse than what happened with the marriage between Sugar Daddy, the rich old Arab Sheikh Ahmed, and the beautiful Christian wife, Christy. This is a problem for which the Canadian immigration authorities have not found a solution. In another case, an Indian bride separated from her Sudanese groom at the international airport in an American city upon their arrival to the Promised Land full of money and went directly to her Indian lover's apartment in another city. She used her black African husband as a means to reach her handsome Indian boyfriend in America. Whatever the case, the Arab sugar daddy Sheikh Ahmed sent to the foreign student, Babakar, 2 visas and 2 tickets for his beautiful and sexy Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, and to her cute daughter, Ifat, to travel with her, along with a letter promising to employ him as his official translator once he finished his studies at the University of Bombay after a half year. He also sent 15,000 rupees and $500. He ordered Babakar to help the maid, Rayhana Khan, prepare her travel papers, give her the other 10,000 rupees and $500 as well, and keep the remaining 5,000 rupees for himself. Before he meets Rayhana to give her her share of the Indian and American money, the one-eyed Babakar searches for his ugly Indian girlfriend Jamila Malik and asks her on a date because he has some particularly important good news to share with her. The next day, after filling her stomach with food, sweets, tea, coffee, and anything else she wanted to eat, the crazy Habib revealed the good news to his ugly Habibiti and showed her the promised employment letter. Then he got down on his knees and asked her to marry him. Jamila's selfish ambitions quickly took into account the pros and cons and agreed to marry him if certain conditions were met, namely that he reach the promised land first, then return after a year and marry her. And only after that she would go with him to the land of the rich Arabs, which is overflowing with money and gold. But she said that she would not allow him to consummate his marriage to her until they arrived together as bride and groom first to the rich kingdom of Arabia. She made her condition very clear that there would be no sex between them as husband and wife until they reached the gates of heaven in Saudi Arabia. In plain words, she said to him he will not be allowed to fuck her by inserting his black penis into her red virginal pussy and breaking her hymen, except in the kingdom of Tartarus. However, the crazy lover, One-Eyed Babakar, accepted these unfair demands from his ugly Indian beauty. From him, it was Saturday evening when the lover Babakar Hussain Osama received Jamila Malik's promise of marriage. After that, he went to meet the lovely maid Rayhana Khan and handed her the Indian and foreign money sent to her by her sugar daddy, the wealthy Sheikh Ahmed, in addition to 2 visas and tickets for her and her daughter, Ifat, to travel abroad. The foreign student Babakar fears that someone in the apartment where he lives will steal these important documents and money from his bag in his room while he is sleeping or absent. On that day, his Sudanese roommates are having a party and many foreign boys and girls have been invited. His friends will celebrate the end of their exams, which ended on Friday. Each of them had invited his girlfriend and her friends. Every lover will bring her boyfriend, and there will be a wild and noisy gathering of young foreign students who will lose control of themselves and indulge in excessive drinking of alcohol, dancing, and orgies. Basically, it was the fear of getting drunk and losing all the travel papers and important documents of the maid and her daughter that led Babakar to finally decide to give those expensive items to Rayhana along with her share of Indian rupees and US dollars. After that, he promised her that as soon as the 2 passports arrived at his apartment address, he would come and deliver them to her. He added that her Arab sponsor had already booked their flight and informed her of the date and time of their flight from India to Saudi Arabia. Handing over the important travel papers he received from her sugar daddy to Rayhana and her daughter, Ifat relieved Babakar of a heavy responsibility in this regard and left him free to enjoy the party with his friends. The only person at the party who would be without a girlfriend would be him. The Sudanese lover Babakar had mentioned the party to his ugly Indian girlfriend, Jamila, and that he would like her to attend. But she told him that she was not the kind of bad Muslima girl who goes out to a party with someone who is not her legal Muslim husband. Therefore, the black one-eyed lover apologized to his morally good girlfriend and promised her that he would never ask her to come to the apartment where he lived again because she was not his legal Muslim wife yet. After his ugly Indian sweetheart, Jamila rejected the invitation to attend the end of exams party. The Sudanese student went to the liquor store, bought 1 bottle of black level whiskey, and then returned to the apartment to have some fun with the other foreign students. Chapter 31. Mass arrest by Bombay police, be it due to a bad omen, an evil eye, or a curse from birth, whenever the Muslim maid Rayhana's journey to the desert paradise gets closer. The Bombay police create some false charges and issue an arrest warrant and bar her exit from the hellish state of Hindustan. Moreover, the devil incarnate, Muhammad Satan Khan, placed barriers and obstacles at the passport office and the international airport. Will these obstacles prevent her from flying this time? God only knows. At that evening party, about 19 foreign girlfriends gathered with their boyfriends at Vakula's apartment and gleefully celebrated 1 less semester to worry about. The party continued until 2:30 a.m. in the early hours of the next morning and would have continued until dawn had the Indian neighbors not called the Bombay police and reported the loud noise made by some black African students. The police stormed in and evicted all the foreign guests, bringing a measure of peace to the apartment complex. No one was arrested because 2 bottles of whiskey and 5,000 rupees were offered as ransom for the release of the peace and quiet violators. The bribe paved the way for the police to allow 4 of the girlfriends to stay with their Sudanese boyfriends and send the other 5 couples on their way. The next morning, the one-eyed Babacar was so exhausted from everything that had happened on this festive occasion that he fell asleep like Rip Van Winkle. He would have slept through the next night, Saturday, if Kalina police officers had not shown up again at their apartment. Babacar woke up screaming when he felt someone pulling him from the bed with his left leg. When he opened his eyes and saw a policeman hovering over him, he thought he was having a terrible nightmare. The policeman grabbed him by the arm and forced him to his feet. Without saying anything to him, the Indian policeman led him by his nightgown into the living room. Babacar was shocked when he saw more than a dozen armed members of the Kalina Police Department inside the apartment. All 4 of his roommates and their 4 girlfriends had already been forced out of their beds, brought into the living room, forced to get on their knees and put their hands on their heads. Babacar then asked his Sudanese friends in Arabic why these policemen had returned. None of them have any idea why their apartment was raided again by the cops. One of the policemen shouted at Babacar and asked him to be quiet. While the 9 foreign students were kneeling in the living room and surrounded by 6 fully armed policemen, the other police officers entered their bedrooms and began searching their bags and lockers. After looting every bag and safe, Bombay Narcotics police officers claimed to have found what they were looking for. They then informed the 9 foreign students that they were being arrested on charges of smuggling and selling drugs. In India, it is better to be arrested for first-degree murder or terrorist conspiracy than to be charged with drug trafficking. Indians collectively believe that the killer will kill one person and the terrorist will explode his body into smithereens, taking a few hundred innocents with him, but the drug lord will kill millions and cause widespread devastation to the entire community. What's more, a common misconception in Bombay is that every African student who comes to India for university studies will be involved in drug smuggling or distribution. While this is by no means true, the facts show a tendency for this type of violation. It would not be an exaggeration to claim that almost every Nigerian student in India is in one way or another involved in some clandestine drug smuggling operation. Almost every week a Nigerian student is arrested at Bombay International Airport with drugs in his luggage. Sometimes, Nigerian students were caught with drugs inside their body cavities. When the Bombay Narcotics Department decided to crack down on drug dealers, the Nigerian students came up with new methods to avoid capture and detection. Nigerian drug traffickers package drugs into capsules and swallow them. The capsules will remain intact for a few hours before your digestive system dissolves them and attempts to digest them. If the capsules are not removed within a specified period of time, the smuggling person will drop dead. It didn't take long for the police to figure it out, and scanners were soon brought in to detect drugs hidden in the cavities and stomachs of smuggling people. Having said that, one can confidently say that it is not true that every African student is involved in drug trafficking. Regardless, many Indians believe that every Black African came to India not to study at the university but to smuggle drugs. In Bombay, if someone hated a foreign student and wanted to ruin his life, he would find a way to hide drugs in his bag or apartment, then make an anonymous phone call to the police and report a smuggled African foreign student doing the forbidden act. He accuses him of being involved in some type of drug activity. Another way some Indians can harm foreign students is through false medical reports about AIDS. In the city of Aurangabad, a Black Sudanese student fell in love with the Indian daughter of the police commissioner. When the father learned of the love affair that occurred between the so-called ugly black monkey and his beautiful Indian girl, he broke off their relationship in a very cruel way. I am not exaggerating when I say that some Indians call African students ugly black monkeys. In Bombay, African students are called black Negroes, but in other cities, they are called black monkeys to their faces. By the way, most Indian universities will implement a mandatory system for all foreign students to be tested for AIDS at least once, and if the test result is positive, the foreign student will be arrested and deported to his country. When the police commissioner discovered the love affair between his beautiful daughter, an upper-class girl, and the so-called ugly black student from Sudan, he arrested him and then retested him for AIDS. He then bribed an Indian doctor at the civil hospital to get a positive result. The Sudanese student was arrested, his name was blacklisted, and he was quickly deported to his country. Unfortunately, on Saturday morning in particular, after raiding the apartment of the 5 foreign students, the Bombay Anti-Narcotics Police found drugs in the bag of the Sudanese student, Babakar Alawar. A word of truth must be said here. During my 14 years of living in India, I have never heard of a Sudanese student using drugs or being arrested for drug use. I lived in Nagpur city for 3 years, over a period of time a year in Ahmedabad city, and 10 years in the cosmopolitan city of Bombay, but I have never seen or heard of a Sudanese student becoming involved in drug activities. However, the apartment where Babakar stays with his 4 Sudanese friends is located in one of the 4 tallest buildings in Vakola. Each building is at least 10 stories high. This part of the city is called Vakola Colony and is surrounded by a high fence. There is only one way in and one way out, and that is through the main fence gate. During the day, the complex is always guarded by a guard who sits in a small booth and carries a large, long stick in his hand. There is another guard on the night watch. Each guard will cover a 12-hour shift. There is a third guard whose job is to make rounds during the night and keep hitting the pavement with his big stick. He must hit the asphalt street making a loud sound with his stick, tat, tat. The colony is well guarded during the night by the watchman who sits at the main gate and the watchman who surrounds the fence during the third watch and repeatedly beats him with a big stick. When I arrived in India, I was perplexed by the night watchman who continued this elaborate ritual all night with his stick, preventing me from restful sleep. The next day I asked my Indian friend Vishwas why there was such commotion going on all night. He told me that thieves recognize the strokes of a stick like a watchman on his rounds, awake and alert, instead of sleeping in a corner of the building. Residents hear the sound of the stick and know that the night watchman is awake and alert, so they sleep safely during the night. Night watchman disturbance is a phenomenon that can be seen in every city and town in India. Another strange thing about the night watchmen is that they are always from Nagaland. Once again, I asked my friend Vishwas, why do the night watchmen always come from Nagaland? He said that no one could watch all night or stay awake and go around in circles and beat the ground with his stick except a man from Nagaland. I couldn't refute my Indian friend because I couldn't do the job even if they gave me 1,000 rupees for every night of guarding. The people of Nagaland are native to India, but they do not look like Indians. They resemble the Chinese and Japanese in features and height. Vakola Colony has 2 other guards during the day as well. The first guard is the guard whose job is to sit for 12 hours in his cabin at the gate and ensure that no stranger enters the complex unless express permission is obtained from the apartment tenant in question. The second guard is called the left guard. In India, an elevator is called a lift. If you say elevator in Bombay, most people will not understand what you are talking about. The lift guard must sit inside the elevator from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. If anyone comes between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., they must, regardless of their age or illness, use the stairs to reach their apartment even if it is on the 14th floor. This guard man has a lunch break and a dinner break. If someone comes during his lunch or dinner break, he must use the stairs at these times as well. The man sitting inside the elevator has a key and must lock the elevator during breaks and while he is out of service. His most important duty is to monitor who comes in and who goes out. If someone managed to jump over the high fence or trick the guard and make his way into the elevator, the lift man would not let him go any further. He will also not be able to use the stairs unless he is a resident of the colony and has a key to open the stairs door. The lift man has a seat inside the elevator, and he has to sit there all the time on that chair and watch with his open eyes all the residents and visitors coming in and going out. He must also protect married women and young girls from being sexually harassed, assaulted, and raped inside the elevator. Since that Vakola colony is relatively well guarded day and night, how did the horrific items and forbidden drugs get into the bag of the Sudanese student Babakar Alawar? There are several possibilities. Either one of the 10 visitors who were invited to the party somehow got into Babakar's room and placed contraband there to implicate him in a serious crime, or someone entered the apartment when no one was there and put drugs in his bag. The 4 Sudanese roommates will be exempt from suspicion because they were all arrested at the same time as their 4 girlfriends. Only someone above the law would try to do something like this, or someone who lacked sufficient mental capacity would be so stupid as to do such a crazy thing. It is highly unlikely that all 5 other friends and their girlfriends, who were persuaded by the police to leave the party at 2:30 a.m., entered the room and hid the drugs in Babakar's bag. The other possibility is the only reasonable assumption left to explore. If someone had broken into the apartment in his absence, Babakar and his 4 other companions would have found out about the break-in and would have reported it to the police or filed a complaint with the colony secretary. Every year, the inhabitants of each colony meet, choose a secretary from among themselves, and pay him his salary. If someone has a complaint about his neighbors or any problem in his apartment, he will file a complaint with the secretary. The only other possibility is that someone stole the key from one of the 4 roommates or had a spare key. All spare keys are kept with the secretary. It was breaking and disturbing news when the midday newspaper in Bombay broke the news of the mass arrest of the 5 Sudanese students and their girlfriends in the Santa Cruz area, in Vacola Colony. This was the first time that Sudanese students were arrested on drug-related charges. All 1,900 Sudanese students at Bombay University went to Vacola Colony and tried to find out how this could have happened. None of them believed these accusations when they read them in the midday newspaper. The huge gathering of black African students in front of the colony led to the secretary calling in the police and forcefully dispersing them. Meanwhile, inside the interrogation room at the Bombay police headquarters, the 5 detained Sudanese students and their 4 foreign girlfriends were severely beaten and tortured to death. Their so-called confessions were forcefully extracted from their bleeding mouths, broken teeth, and dislocated jaws. Narcotics police investigators are tougher than any other police department in India. They are more cruel than the terrorists of the Islamic Caliphate in Syria, which is euphemistically called ISIS. Whatever they want you to confess, they will force you to confess, and then record your confession and use it against you in court. Among the 9 foreign suspects, the one-eyed Babakar's face became almost unrecognizable after sustained beatings. Not even his mother or father could recognize his completely disfigured face. Even his ugly friend Jamila, who had recently accepted his engagement with conditions attached and agreed to marry him, would be unable to recognize him or willing to see his disfigured face if she knew who he was. They broke all his front teeth and blinded his seeing eye. The area around his good eye became swollen and disappeared in its socket. Every inch of his naked body received strong blows with an iron rod. He was so battered that he could no longer scream and could only muster a weak groan, struggling to breathe through his broken nose. His jaw became dislocated. Some of his ribs became smashed and broken, and his teeth fell out of his mouth, which was bleeding profusely. Some of his nails were pulled out. In the third world, there are no worse people than policemen. People will say if your finger becomes a policeman, cut it off. I think all these ruthless Indian police officers will burn in hell forever. Chapter 32. Searching for the Great Negro. A week later, the Indian maid, Rehana Khan, waited for the one-eyed black African boy, Babakar, in the same restaurant where he asked her to meet him every Saturday. Their usual routine every Saturday is for him to meet her at that restaurant and inform her of the progress of her travel abroad soon. Rehana spent nearly 4 hours waiting for him at their meeting place, spontaneously ordering food from the menu for the restaurant until her stomach protested. After she ate a lot of food, also drank tea 4 times, coffee 3 times, and soup twice. One was chicken soup and the other was lamb soup. She knows that if she stops ordering from the menu, the waiter will kick her out, and if she refuses to go, he will hand her over to the cops. Sometimes, you may be beaten or raped by thugs who are recruited as restaurant guards. These thugs are allowed to beat up guests and rape women who ate and refused to pay for their food or said they forgot or lost their money. No restaurant owner wants to spend money on police and lawyers fighting a case in court that is less valuable than the due process of a court. However, after 4 hours, Rehana concluded that the black boy had either forgotten about their meeting or was too ill to keep his appointment. She has no other way to contact him or reach him by phone. Then, she returned to her poor hut and waited for the following Saturday. Her main concern was about the tickets and visas he gave her. He told her that he would meet her the following Saturday and take them from her and keep them in his suitcase at his apartment. Then he will return them to her at the international airport on the day of their flight. The Indian maid was very careful to keep their important travel documents safe. Fortunately for Rayhana Khan, the one-eyed Babakar gave her those tickets and visas a few hours before his arrest. If the corrupt Indian police had found their travel papers in his bag on the day of his arrest, she would have been implicated in serious drug charges and arrested, beaten, and gang-raped again. This time she should never dream of being acquitted and allowed to return to her shack as happened in the false terrorism charges. A person involved in a drug conviction may be sentenced to at least 19 to 20 years in prison. Moreover, this time she wouldn't have any rich suspects with her to appoint her lawyers, as did her Arab sugar daddy Sheikh Ahmed and the rich Indian Muhammad Khan. She kept the travel papers in her pocket all day, and when she slept at night, she put them under her blanket and slept on them. Slum dwellers and shawl dwellers do not use beds. They simply place blankets or mattresses on the floor and sleep on them. Rayhana fears that her important travel papers will be destroyed if she deposits them in her underground bank where she keeps thousands of rupees and $500. Her savings increased when Babakar gave her 5,000 Indian rupees and another $500. With all this money, the Indian mother stopped feeding her children lentils and rice. She bought a live, fat chicken, slaughtered it with her kitchen knife, and cooked it for them. On some days, she even bought halal meat for cows and sheep and fed her emaciated children hearty meals. Before she became rich among the slum dwellers of Dharavi, necessity forced her, her mother, and her 6 children to endure vegetarian meals even though they were not Hindus. They ate only 2 meals a day, lunch and dinner, but after receiving heavenly manna from the rich old Arab sugar daddy, they began to eat breakfast in the morning. Rayhana waited another 7 days before going to the same restaurant again and waiting for Babakar. After 3.5 hours of waiting and ordering food, tea, and coffee, she got up and returned to her Pur neighborhood. This time, Rayhana felt incredibly sad. She thought that the good black Negro boy might have died or that something bad had happened to him. She recalled that Babakar told her that her Arab sponsor had booked their flight and gave her the departure date and time. Rayhana simply convinced herself that she might have misunderstood what Babakar told her when he gave her the tickets and visas. Maybe he wanted her to go to the airport that day and meet him there, and then get her and her daughter on the plane and send them to the wealthy country of Saudi Arabia. She recalled that on her first attempt, when she and her daughter were supposed to travel to their promised land, the owner of the travel agency, Mr. Muhammad Khan, gave them money for the taxi and told them to come to the airport and meet the black Negro boy who was going to help them enter their plane and fly to the promised land, which was flowing with money and honey. There were only 2 days left until her scheduled departure when Rayhana came to this conclusion. So, she went to the market and bought a beautiful dress for her cute daughter Ifit and a new dress for herself as well. This time, Rayhana decided not to allow the same Muslim snake to bite her again and send her to prison or hospital, or even make her fall into her grave. When she was miraculously saved from the charge of being a suicide bomber who was supposed to blow up an Indian Airlines plane, Rayhana learned through her Hindu neighbors who was the evil Muslim woman who felt jealous of her beauty and coveted her wealth. Therefore, she falsely accused her of murder and theft and reported her to the police authority in the day she and her daughter were supposed to travel to the paradise of the promised land, but instead landed in the most treacherous Indian dungeon in the entire world. So, this time she doesn't want to let the black burqa witch, God's impure Muslim policewoman, prevent them from leaving their hellish country again. She even decided not to go to the Muslim husband of that evil witch who wanted to marry her after her husband died and make her his second Muslim wife. Incidentally, India is the only secular country in the world that allows Muslims to practice the teachings of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. In other words, Muslims practice secular Indian law and Sharia law side by side. For example, if a Muslim man marries 2 wives at the same time, he is allowed to do so, but if a Hindu man or a Buddhist man marries two wives, he will go to prison. For this reason, the lustful Muslim husband for God's appointed holy policewoman himself wanted to marry the beautiful widow Rayhana Khan and make her his second Muslim wife, but as we know, the good woman Rayhana rejected the marriage proposal because his number one wife is her best Muslim friend, as she used to think that before she sent her to prison. As for her mother and 5 children, Rayhana believed that the money she was thinking of leaving to them might keep them alive until she found a safe way to send them money from her new paradise. 2 days later, the wise widow Rayhana Khan revealed her hidden treasure to her mother and asked her to use the money to feed her grandchildren and herself. She even gave $500 to her mother. She only took 500 rupees with her, but she asked her mother to keep those thousands of rupees and foreign currencies inside her underground bank in the hut. This time she did not tell anyone where she and her daughter were going to travel except her old mother and her God Allah and his holy messenger Muhammad. Then she took her daughter Ifat and her small bag and headed to the airport. She carries a small bag of luggage just like a little girl's school backpack. But the slum lady Rayhana Khan doesn't know where the airport is. She does not want to take a taxi because she is afraid that the cab driver will kidnap her, rape her, and then kill her and her young daughter as well. She heard stories from some slum women about how beautiful young women were kidnapped and raped by taxi drivers. She had even heard of taxi drivers working with pimps, kidnapping young women, and selling them as prostitutes or selling them to become criminals for gangs. So, she decided to take the local bus to the airport. Rayhana has never been to an airport before. She went to the bus station and asked someone to tell her which bus would take her and her daughter to the airport. She did not mention the airport she was going to. The person she asked looked at her and her small bag and concluded that she was going to the local airport. Then tell her which bus will take her there. So, the mother and daughter boarded the bus and headed to the Santa Cruz domestic airport. When Rayhana arrived at the local airport with her daughter Ifat, she sat on one of the seats and asked her daughter to sit on her lap because the seat was crowded with people. A curious Indian woman of wealthy origin asked her why she was at the airport. Rayhana told her that she had come to take a plane ride. The very rich woman was surprised and then asked her which city in India she would travel to. The rich Indian woman asked her this question because she did not believe that a poor woman like Rayhana could buy 2 plane tickets for herself and her daughter. Rayhana told the rich lady that she and her daughter were traveling to Saudi Arabia. The rich woman burst out laughing when she heard the name of the country the poor woman said she was going to. Then she said to her sarcastically while she was still laughing, "You need to obtain visas and tickets to go to a country like Saudi Arabia, and you will need at least 500,000 rupees to buy visas and tickets for you and your daughter." Rayhana smiled at the nosy, wealthy Indian woman who was interrogating her as if she were a policewoman and looking down on her because of her miserable appearance. Then the slum maid opened her small bag, took out the airline tickets and Saudi visas, and showed them to the rich woman. The upper caste Hindu woman's eyes widened and her mouth dropped open when she saw the travel documents. It took her 10 minutes to examine them to determine if they were real. Then she asked the poor woman how she got her expensive visas and tickets. Rayhana truthfully told her that an old Arab man had given them to her. The proud woman did not believe Rayhana's words, but she told her that she came to the wrong airport. Then she told her that she had to take a taxi and go to Bombay Sahara International Airport located in Andheri area. Trusting the wealthy Indian woman's words, the mother took her daughter and left the Santa Cruz domestic airport. Once again, once outside, she did not take a taxi, but instead asked a man to tell her which bus would take her to the international airport. The man was also surprised when she asked him this question. He also didn't believe that a woman from the slums like Rayhana would have any work at an international airport. She doesn't look like a passenger or someone traveling abroad. Despite what he thought, he didn't think he had the right to question her any further. He told her the name of the bus that ran from the domestic airport to the international airport, then turned and walked away. Rayhana and her daughter Ifat waited for the bus for more than half an hour before it arrived, and she asked the bus driver if this was the bus to the international airport. He also found it difficult to understand why a woman from the slums would go to the international airport, but he said yes and she and her daughter boarded. Rehana does not know the time of their flight. She is illiterate and therefore cannot read the time on their tickets. Neither she nor her daughter went to school at all. She and her daughter also do not have their Indian passports. However, she convinced herself that the good black Negro boy would wait for her at the international airport with their passports. When they arrived at Bombay International Airport, Rehana began searching everywhere for the black boy. She didn't remember his name or where he came from. All this time, Rehana was under the impression that Babakar was an Indian man like her. Some people in India, if you were to ask them where New York or London is located in which country, they would tell you that New York is in Bombay and London is in New Delhi. Rehana has no idea which city Babakar came from. Because of his black color, she guessed he might be from Kerala or Tamil Nadu provinces in South India. She knows he is different from other Indians because he is black and has short curly hair. Everywhere she went with him, she heard other Indians calling him Negro. Rehana thought Negro was an honorable name. To show respect for this particularly important and honorable Negro, she said to him on the day he handed her her first allotment of 10,000 rupees sent to her by the rich old sugar daddy, Shukriya Nigroji, which means thank you, great Negro. Many Indians believe that every black man in the world was named Negro by his parents on the day he was born, and they even believe that a black female is called a Negro woman. In any case, the mother Rehana and her daughter, if it kept wandering from one place to another inside the huge international airport in search of their great Negro. Airport security allowed them to enter the departure hall because they showed their tickets and visas confirming their flight number and final destination. So, they walked and searched until they were overcome with fatigue and we sat down to rest. At the place where they rested, there happened to be a black woman who looked like the great lost Negro. Rehana concluded that the woman was a black Negro and therefore must be either the wife or sister of the great Negro. She recognized her as female by her large breasts. So, she started talking to her in Hindi. The black woman could not understand what the Indian woman was telling her because she did not speak Hindi. However, she is interested in knowing what the beautiful Indian woman is trying to tell her. So, she spoke to an old Indian man sitting near her in English and asked him to help translate for them. The old man spoke to Rehana in Hindi and then told the black woman in English that she was looking for a black Negro guy who looked like her husband or brother. The black woman laughed and said that she was not married and had no brother in India. She then added that she was from South Africa and was traveling by air on her way to Johannesburg. She asked the old man to ask Rehana which country she would travel to with her cute daughter. When the old man translated for Rehana what the black woman had asked for, she took out their tickets and visas and showed them to the black woman. The African woman looked at the 2 tickets and exclaimed, "Oh my God! They only have half an hour before takeoff." Then she stood up, grabbed Rehana's hand, and forced her to stand on her feet. The Indian maid was frightened and startled when the black Negro woman took her hand and pulled her to get up. Rehana looked to the old man for an explanation. The old man told her that she should go with her. He also explained that they had to hurry because there were only a few minutes left before their plane took off. Calmness returned to Rehana after the old Indian man reassured her that it was okay to go with the Negro woman. Then she turned to take her daughter's hand. The African woman did not let go of Rehana's hand and continued to lead the way through the airport. When they reached the end of the long departure hall, they found 4 security men guarding the entrance to the departure corridor. The African woman spoke to the Indian security personnel in English. Then she took the visas and tickets from Rehana's hands and showed them to one of the security men. The man waved his hand and let them in. The woman then dragged Rehana and her daughter down the corridor. When they arrived at the crowded departure place, there were 12 checkpoints and 12 rows of passengers impatiently waiting for their turn. The black African woman kept pulling Rehana through all the lines of people standing and waiting. The passengers thought that the beautiful black Negro woman was an air hostess for an African airline. When they crossed the last queue, The bold black woman found an Arab flight attendant and asked her which checkpoint handles the travel papers of passengers heading to Jeddah in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The air hostess told her that she was one of the Arab crew members of the Saudi plane. The flight attendant then asked the black woman if she was traveling on this particular flight. The African woman did not answer and merely took Rayhana's tickets and visas out of her hand and presented them to the air hostess. The Arab air hostess told her that she was looking for these two passengers because it was the final announcement and the doors on the plane were about to close in a few minutes. Then she asked Rayhana in English about boarding passes. The African woman interceded and told her that they hadn't gotten their boarding passes yet and neither of them could speak English. Without saying another word, the Arab air hostess took Rayhana's hand and rushed her and her daughter Ifit to the nearest checkpoint. The Arab air hostess then spoke to the Indian airport officer in English and explained to him that there were less than 10 minutes left to board the plane. The Indian man took the tickets and visas from the air hostess and looked at them. He checked the computer and verified that the mother Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifit Khan had booked the flight to Saudi Arabia. After that, he took out 2 boarding passes, quickly filled them out, and gave them to the Arab air hostess. Some passengers who had been in line for a long time expressed their dissatisfaction and objection to the Arab flight attendant and the Indian airport official allowing others to jump in front of them. The Arab air hostess ignored their complaints and started running towards gate number 17, accompanied by Rayhana and her daughter. As they were on their way to the gate, the black woman from South Africa smiled and waved them a final farewell. The beautiful mother, Rayhana Khan, did not bother to look back and thank the so-called black Negro woman. However, her cute 7-year-old daughter, Ifit, turned her face, then waved her little left hand and also smiled at the black woman who helped her with her mother. The black African woman became very happy when she learned that she had done a good job of helping 2 inexperienced Indian female passengers in time to avoid missing their overseas flight. However, neither the good Negro woman from South Africa nor the hasty Arab air hostess would have been happy to have known that they had ignorantly broken the law and sent 2 Indian passengers out of their country without their valid Indian passports. Chapter 33. The work of an evil genius monster. Muhammad Khan, the devil's advocate, has done everything in his power to ensure that the so-called Kalaba prostitute Rayhana Khan and her poor daughter Ifit Khan do not travel out of the country. He bribed his informant at the passport office and ordered him not to send their passports to the so-called dreaded black nigger, the address of his former disloyal Sudanese employee Babakar, but instead to send them directly to his agency's address. The informant complied with his request and their passports were mailed to Muhammad Khan Tourism and Travel Company. As soon as the 2 passports reached his hands, the self-anointed Lord of Hell burned them to ashes with fire. He knows that burning the 2 passports will not be enough in itself to stop the wealthy sugar daddy Sheikh Ahmed's plan in its tracks and prevent his beloved Indian maid from handing her over to him in his arms in his country, the Kingdom of Tartarus, Saudi Arabia. The beautiful Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, can still complain to the police about her missing passports and ask the passport office to reissue them again for the 3rd time. Muhammad Khan remembered that Sheikh Ahmed told him that an ugly old black Indian woman arrived at Jeddah International Airport and claimed to be his maid, Rayhana Khan. On this basis, his travel agency filed a complaint with the international airport about the theft of the passports of 2 of its female clients from his commercial agency, and that the thief was one of his employees, a young rapist named Jamal Khan. This criminal thief admitted to the police when he was interrogated that he sold the stolen passports to another travel agency. Then Satan incarnate bribed one of his agents at Bombay International Airport to blacklist the passports of the mother Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifit Khan, and if any 2 Indian Muslim travelers appear carrying passports issued in these names, they must be immediately arrested, thrown behind bars, and accused of theft and forgery. The deceitful scoundrel is still not satisfied with the 2 obstacles created by the passport office and the international airport of Mumbai to prevent mother Rayhana and her daughter Ifit from traveling to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He wants to do something to secure his evil plan. He expected that the wealthy Sheikh Ahmed, Sugar Daddy Al-Arabi, had already sent the 2 visas and tickets to the damned black foreign student, Babakar Alawar, to give them to his beautiful and sexy Indian maid, Rayhana Khan. Therefore, the genius villain Muhammad Khan decided to steal the 2 visas and tickets from the possession of the Sudanese boy, Babakar. He has already obtained the address of the apartment where Babakar resides in the Vakola area. He contacted a notorious Muslim Gunda gang leader in Vakola neighborhood and hired him to do his dirty work. He was asked to enter the apartment of the black foreign student, Babakar Hussain Osama, and remove the 2 visas and tickets issued to Rayhana Khan and her daughter, Ifat Khan. After the visas and tickets were stolen, drugs must be planted inside the bag of the foreign student, Babakar Hussain Osama. The genius evil Muslim man Muhammad Khan hates nothing more than catching one of his employees or ex-employees doing something behind his back or refusing to obey his orders, even sexual exploitation in the case of beautiful female employees. For this reason, he sent Jamal Khan to prison for 14 years and fired his sister Nafisa Khan from her job when she refused to voluntarily have sex with him inside his office after work hours. He was also angry when he discovered that the Sudanese foreign student named the damned black nigger, Babakar Alawar, who was working for him, was conspiring with his former wealthy Saudi business partner, who had become his arch-enemy, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed, to prepare travel papers for his beautiful and sexy Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, and her young daughter, Ifat Khan. In India, when the Gunda gang leader identifies you as his target and puts your name on his target list, no living human being on earth can keep you away from the danger that is imminent to happen to you sooner or later. Even the Indian police couldn't protect you from him. The only way to escape from this desperate situation is to kill the Gunda before he kills you. But killing a Muslim Gunda is more difficult than trying to kill hundreds of ISIS terrorists alone. Each Gunda leader belongs to a gang of hundreds of thugs from the underground Bombay Mafia. Indian Gundas are like Muslim terrorists in their numbers, which outnumber flies by day and mosquitoes by night. Each Gunda leader has many dangerous gangsters. They are all known as Gandas. In India, the Gunda is an antisocial element who always carries a knife, sword, hammer, or gun, and is ready to use it to kill people in public places and in broad daylight. When the Muslim Gunda of Vakola accepted Muhammad Khan's assignment, he did one thing to grant himself unhindered access to the apartment of the black Negro foreign student, Babakar Alawar. He made an anonymous phone call to the building secretary and told him that he would kidnap and kill his son, rape, and then shoot his wife if he refused to hand over the spare key to the apartment of the 5 black Negro foreign students staying in his building. The secretary knew that when a Gunda posed a threat to someone's life, it was sure to end in disaster. The words of the Gunda are more predictable than any prophecy of a prophet, seer, or forecaster of grave future events, and have greater power and influence than all the gods of India. To protect his life and his family, the secretary agreed to hand over the spare key without question. The Muslim Gunda told him that he would send 3 of his dangerous men to get the spare key from him. He also told him that both the guards sitting at the gate and the left man sitting inside the elevator should not stand in their way when the Gunda thugs enter the compound to get the spare key or when they need to get to the apartment of the 5 black foreign students. The secretary promised in fear and trembling that he would abide by the demands and conditions set by the Muslim Gunda leader. The frightened Hindu secretary man thought that the Muslim Gunda wanted to send some gangsters to rob the black Negro foreign student's apartment of US dollars, foreign clothes, or other expensive things. While the foreign student Babakar Alawar and his 4 Sudanese friends were taking their final exams at their university colleges, the 3 Muslim Gundas of thugs arrived at the Vakula apartment building, obtained the spare key from the terrified Hindu secretary, and entered the apartment of the 5 black Negro students. They conducted a thorough search of each room and identified the student Babakar's bag by his photo ID card. They were unable to find the 2 visas and tickets for the Indian maid, Rayhana Khan, and her daughter, Ifat Khan, but they put the drugs inside the bag of the black Sudanese foreign student, Babakar Hussain Osama. They made sure to leave everything as it was before they left the apartment. After that, they locked the apartment, returned the spare key to the frightened secretary, and left. The Hindu secretary was very surprised when he saw the three Muslim gangsters leaving the apartment empty-handed and not carrying any stolen items in their hands. But he was frightened enough and held his tongue without asking them what they had done inside the apartment of the five black Negroes. It was the hideous Muhammad Khan himself who made an anonymous phone call to the Bombay Narcotics Control Police and reported drug trafficking activity taking place inside a particular apartment located in Vacola Building at Santa Cruz area. He refused to reveal his identity to the police and claimed to be a good Muslim citizen who would love to stop crime. He gave them the building and apartment number and made sure to tell the anti-drug police that there were 5 black African foreign students involved. He merely claimed to be a devout, God-fearing Mohammedan Indian citizen who runs a profitable business and whose duty is to stop crime. The anti-narcotics police were unable to trace the source of the anonymous phone call because the devil incarnate, Muhammad Khan, made the call from a public phone on Causeway Street in Colaba neighborhood. As the evil genius expected, the Bombay police raided the apartment of the 5 innocent Sudanese foreign students and arrested them along with their 4 foreign student girlfriends. On the same day, when the evil boss Muhammad Khan read the midday newspaper, he laughed until he fell out of his chair. Then he went to his female employees and the only employee in the other office and showed them what the damned one-eyed black Negro boy Babakar Hussein Osama did who worked for him. But some girls doubted the credibility of the accusation and considered it another false charge fabricated by an Indian person who hates black African foreign students, especially the one-eyed Negro Babakar, in whose bag drugs were found. The one who doubted the false accusation the most was the ugly employee, Jamila, whom Babakar loves, but she does not love him. The selfish girl was crushed when she realized that her golden chance to marry a foreigner who promised to take her to the promised land of Saudi Arabia was gone forever. On that fateful morning, just as the Bombay Narcotics Police had taken all 9 African foreign students, boys and girls, to jail, their Indian neighbors broke down the door of their apartment and stole everything. They didn't leave the furniture or anything, they even took the tables and chairs. They also took food and fruit out of the refrigerator and looted them. Even their trash was stolen. The apartment was left empty, as if its occupants had cleaned it before vacating it and moving elsewhere. Shortly after the robbery, the Hindu secretary brought in 3 poor, unemployed women and paid each of them 20 rupees to clean the apartment. Then he called a carpenter and asked him to repair the dilapidated and damaged door. A few days later, he rented the empty apartment to some foreign Arab students who came to study at the University of Bombay from Jordan and Israel. Chapter 34. There is a Muslim female suicide bomber on board. For inexperienced travelers like the beautiful maid Rayhana Khan and her cute daughter Ifat Khan, a plane ride is no fun at all. Everything she heard from the gossip mongers in the shacks and alleys of the slums about plane crashes, hijackings, mid-air explosions by Muslim terrorist suicide bombers or bombs planted inside planes, all of that came to her mind when she boarded the giant Saudi Airlines jumbo jet. Her heartbeat began to increase in rhythm the moment the hasty Arab air hostess dragged her and her daughter onto the plane like 2 lost sheep. It was the same Saudi air hostess who gave them their boarding passes and took them through the narrow aisle of gate number 17 until she got them inside the plane and showed them their seats. She fastened their seat belts, then smiled and left. In their haste, no one bothered to ask them about their valid Indian passports. When they entered the boarding platform with the Arab air hostess, another member of the Saudi cabin crew checked their boarding passes and waved them in. If the Indian Muslim air-traveling maid Rayhana Khan had happened to be a suicide bomber as the appalled Hindu police inspector, Shankaracharya had previously claimed, she might have blown up the plane as soon as it took off and sent all the crew and passengers straight into the sky. No one at Bombay Sahara International Airport checked her small bag or examined her body to see if she had any weapon or an explosive belt tied around her waist. It is fairly common at Bombay International Airport for air passengers to check their bags, get their boarding passes, and then disappear. These same passengers will return to the city and commit murders. These hired killers later used their boarding passes as an alibi to prove that they were outside the country when the murders they were accused of committing were carried out. Thank God, Rayhana Khan is neither a Muslim terrorist suicide bomber nor a paid murderer. When the Saudi plane took off from Bombay International Airport, she started shaking and sweating from head to toe. She holds her chair with one hand and her daughter with the other. She thinks that they might fall out of the plane at any moment, or the plane will fall from the sky and they will all crash on the ground or dive into the Arabian Sea. Her tears flowed like a fountain down her terrified face, but her silence did not hide her panic. Those frightening moments soon passed as the plane began to fly horizontally, and Rayhana began to believe that they had quickly reached their final destination in the promised land overflowing with money and gold. Then the Muslim mother whispered in her daughter Ifit's ear and told her in Urdu that they had arrived in the rich Arab country. This idea is incorrect because one of the Arab cabin crew flight attendants approached their row of seats and asked her in broken Hindi whether she was a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian woman. The inexperienced passenger did not understand the question, but the air hostess checked her boarding pass and understood from her name, Rayhana Khan, that she was a Muslim and therefore a non-vegetarian Indian woman. Then she asked her what kind of biryani she wanted to eat, beef, chicken, or lamb. Again, Rayhana couldn't understand the question. This time, the Arab air hostess enlisted the help of a nearby Hindi translator to explain her question. Rayhana concludes that she is sitting in an expensive restaurant and the food will exceed her budget of 500 rupees. So, she shook her head indicating that she did not want to eat any food. The beautiful Arab flight attendant smiled and then pointed to her cute daughter Ifit, indicating that the little girl traveling with her should at least eat something. When Rayhana rejected her daughter's offer of biryani, the beautiful Arab woman realized that perhaps the poor Indian woman felt she had to pay for the food. She used the same Indian translator and told her that the price of food on the Saudi plane had already been paid for through their airline tickets. Once Rayhana heard that the food was free, she changed her mind and said that she also wanted to eat something. She ordered lamb biryani for herself and chicken biryani for her little daughter. Biryani is the most delicious Pakistani and Indian cuisine. It originated in Persia, today's Iran, and was brought to the Indian subcontinent by Iranian travelers and merchants. It is prepared from tender pieces of chicken, lamb, or beef cooked in a spicy, creamy mixture of rice, saffron, onions, garlic, ginger, turmeric, cumin, tomatoes, ghee, cloves, cardamom, cinnamon, mint leaves, and chili pepper. It seems that the Persian person who created this tasty dish used all the edible herbs and spices in the world to produce this delicious biryani recipe. Biryani is not an everyday dish, but is meant for special occasions like weddings and holiday celebrations. It is also cooked during religious holidays such as Eid al-Fitr at the end of Ramadan, Eid al-Adha during the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, Diwali and Holi for Hindus, Christmas for Indian Christians, etc. Recently, vegetarian biryani has been prepared and served to Hindus in Indian and Pakistani cuisine restaurants abroad such as in Europe, America, Australia, and Canada. Usually, the Indian maid Rayhana and her daughter Ifit did not use the knife and fork very often except when they were eating food while in public. They forgot that they were inside the plane and in a public place and started devouring delicious plates of biryani meat with their fingers and hands as if they were in the poor shack in the Dharavi neighborhood. During her 3-week of honeymooning with her handsome, missing lover Jamal, Rayhana noticed that after every meal they had in a restaurant, her lover would put some money as a tip on the table for the waiter or waitress. In an attempt to be generous with the nutritious and delicious complimentary meal, Rayhana took out a 5-rupee note from her handbag and placed it on the table in front of her seat for the beautiful Arab air hostess to take as a tip. She even licked and sucked her 10 fingers after she finished eating the delicious lamb biryani. When the beautiful Saudi hostess came to take the empty trays, she laughed and returned the money to Rayhana. While she was retrieving the rupee note, she whispered in the ear of the Indian passenger and thanked her for her generosity. Then she used the same Indian translator and explained that the plane was not a restaurant and that they do not accept tips from passengers. After removing all the food trays, some passengers removed their seat belts and began moving around the plane. Some of them go to the lavatory and others just stretch their legs. The naive Muslim traveler, Rayhana, thought that the plane had arrived at the airport in the rich land of the Arabs. So, she asked one of the flight attendants to unbuckle her and her daughter's seatbelts. As soon as they were freed from their seats, the mother took her daughter's hand and began walking her towards the front passenger exit door of the plane. When they reached the door, she grabbed the handle and was about to open the door of the plane that was still hovering in the sky. An air hostess saw her at the right moment and pulled her hand from the door handle. "What do you want to do, ma'am?" the flight attendant shouted at Rayhana. "We're going outside. Return to your seats and do not move until we tell you that the plane has landed safely at Jeddah International Airport." Then the angry air hostess grabbed the hand of the crazy Indian passenger Rayhana and returned her to her seat. She then tied her and her daughter with seat belts. Then she informed the rest of the cabin crew about what had happened. After that, she returned to the passenger, Rayhana, and was accompanied by another air hostess. The second flight attendant asked Rayhana not to move again from her seat, and if she or her daughter wanted to use the restroom, she had to press the button above her, and the flight attendant would come and take her to the toilet. The air hostess then asked the passengers sitting around and near Rayhana not to help her unbuckle the seat belt, and if she was able to unbuckle the seat belt herself, they should inform a member of the cabin crew immediately. As a result, the inexperienced Indian passengers were grounded and imprisoned in their seats until another problem occurred. Before the plane landed at Jeddah International Airport, flight attendants distributed forms to passengers and asked them to fill them out. By filling out the forms, passengers will avoid any unnecessary delays at Jeddah International Airport upon their arrival. The forms are written in Hindi, Arabic, and English. Rayhana had never gone to school in her life, so the writing on the form seemed to her like black ants crawling together and swarming together. She turned to the passenger sitting next to her and asked him to help her fill out the forms. The traveling man is an Indian like her. He agreed to help the illiterate Indian women. He began by asking her questions on the form and then started filling in the information specified in the appropriate boxes and lines. "What is your first name?" "Rayhana." "Last name?" "Khan." "Coming from any country and city?" "Bombay, India." "Going to any country and city?" "Jeddah, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia." "Purpose of visit?" "On a maid visa." "Address?" "I don't have an address." The Indian man laughed when the passenger Rayhana said she had no address. Then he asked her where she lived before she traveled from Bombay. She told him that she used to live in the Dharavi slum area. The man wrote as a vague address, Dharavi slum, Bombay. "Passport number?" "I do not have a passport." The man was deeply shocked when the Indian passenger Rayhana Khan said she did not have a passport. He asked her this question 3 times before asking her to give him her travel papers so he could find her passport among them. He said he would show her what her passport looked like. Rayhana gave him the 2 tickets, the 2 visas, and the 2 boarding passes. The man told her that none of the official papers she had given him had her Indian passport among them. He then took out his Indian passport and showed it to her and asked her to show him the same official document as hers. Rayhana told him that her and her daughter's passports were kept with the black Negro boy who was helping them to travel abroad. The man asked her to look inside her small bag again. The maid Rayhana Khan knows that she does not have 2 Indian passports in her small bag. However, she handed her entire bag over to him. The man searched through her little bag and carefully took out her Punjabi clothes, salwar kameez or pants and shirt, her small red swimsuit-like underwear, a green Indian sari for the mother Rayhana, and a beautiful black dress for her daughter Ifat. Then he carefully searched the small, empty bag as if he were searching for gold in a mine hole. Finally, the Indian man became convinced that the poor Muslim woman and her poor daughter had somehow entered the Saudi plane without their Indian passports. Out of pity, the Indian passenger waved his hand to the same beautiful Arab air hostess and invited her to come, then whispered in her ear that the Indian woman sitting near him with her daughter did not have their 2 passports. The Saudi air hostess did not believe this amazing news. She spoke to the Indian passenger, Rayhana, through an Indian translator, another female passenger, to verify the man's claim. The Muslim passenger Rayhana Khan gave her the same vague answer, "Our passports are with the black Negro boy." The air hostess happened to be the same one who had screamed at Rayhana before and prevented her from opening the plane door. So, she doubted the credibility of Rayhana's words and thought there was something suspicious about her behavior. She returned to the other crew members and informed them of the suspicious behavior of the Indian woman traveling with them inside the plane. A cabin crew member came to the hasty conclusion that the Indian woman might be a Muslim terrorist, which greatly frightened the hell out of the others. Another frightened air hostess immediately backed up her conclusion. The belief that the Indian passenger Rayhana is a Muslim terrorist is supported and agreed upon by all members of the cabin crew. Even the pilot and his co-captain agreed that this Indian woman must be a Muslim terrorist. The hasty conclusion was unanimously accepted because it was based on several observations. First of all, the Arabian air hostess stressed that she cannot believe that a passenger could pass through all those tight security and checkpoints at Bombay Sahara International Airport without a valid Indian passport. Secondly, no passenger is stupid enough to try to open the cabin door of an airplane while in the air as this Indian Muslim woman named Rayhana Khan did. Thirdly, the Indian Muslim woman did not go through the legal process that every passenger must go through before being allowed to enter the plane. Accordingly, the Muslim woman, Rayhana Khan, was smuggled onto the plane through a carefully thought-out terrorist plot. When the plane crew collectively came to believe that Rayhana Khan was a terrorist, they notified the armed marshal guarding the plane against any security threat. He is a Saudi security man affiliated with the anti-terrorism police. The air marshal took the matter seriously. He asked the flight crew to try not to alert the suspected Indian woman. Passengers must not be informed either so as not to cause panic and chaos inside the plane. Then the marshal went to the suspected passenger, unbuckled her seat belt, and asked her to come with him. Rayhana refused to come with him without her daughter. She asked him to unbuckle her daughter's seat belt and then they both could come with him. The marshal inadvertently agreed and released Ifit from her seat belt as well. Then he asked them to follow him. When they reached the small lavatory, the suspected Indian passenger was asked to go inside. This time Rayhana Khan obeyed his order without asking her daughter Ifit to come with her. After that, the marshal called one of the flight attendants and told her to ask Rayhana Khan to remove all her clothes, including her underwear and bra, and become completely naked. The Muslim passenger Rayhana refused to take off her clothes when the Arab flight attendant asked her through an Indian translator to do so. The Arab marshal told Rayhana that if she did not remove her clothes completely, he would enter the toilet and remove them from her body. The Indian Muslim passenger was afraid that the angry armed Arab man would forcefully remove her clothes and tear them, so she took off her Indian sari first, then her pants and Punjabi shirt. She felt ashamed and afraid as she stood in front of the strange man with only her bra over her big breasts and her small pink panty over her large buttocks and covering her hairy pussy. The armed Arab man did not just remove her outer dress. He then insisted that the suspect remove her bra and underwear as well and become completely naked. Rayhana started crying and begged the Arab man while screaming and putting her hands on her face and asked him not to expose her private parts. However, the marshal refused to change his mind, and as she stood and cried, he repeatedly shouted at her to quickly remove her bra and underwear. By this time, all passengers had become aware of the Indian woman suspected of being a suicide bomber and that she might blow up the plane at any moment. Some women and children started crying, while the male passengers tremble with fear and look at the toilet where the female suicide bomber is expected to carry out her terrorist attack at any moment and send them all burned and charred corpses into the air. Some devout passengers, Christians, Muslims, and Hindus began praying for their inevitable death. The armed Arab marshal continued to insist that the suspected Indian passenger remove her clothes completely, while Rayhana continued to refuse to obey his orders. When the suspected Muslim terrorist continued to refuse to remove the rest of her clothes, The marshal took one step into the toilet and shouted at the top of his lungs while shouting at her in Arabic, which was translated into Hindi by the translator. "Take off your underwear and bra or I will do it myself." The terrified Indian passenger Rayhana Khan concluded that the angry Arab man was going to rape her. She started screaming loudly and begged him not to enter the toilet and attack her. She promised that she would remove the rest of her clothes. Then, shaking and trembling, Rayhana removed her black bra and pink underwear, then covered her genitals with her hands. The marshal asked her to put her hands above her head and turn in the opposite direction. Rayhana obeyed the command and placed her hands on her head. She never expected that one day she would stand in front of a man who was not her legal Muslim husband, completely naked like this. Her tears fell like hot water down her face, and her body trembled from head to toe. The marshal holds a metal detector in his left hand, and in his right hand he holds a gun and points it at her. Then he moved one step into the lavatory until his body was almost attached to the sexy naked body of the suspected Muslim suicide terrorist and began examining it. Then he asked her to turn forward and face him. His metal detector moved from Rayhana's big, bare breasts, past her stomach, her black pubic hair, her vulva, and her long legs until it reached her bare feet. After that, he asked her to turn around and face the opposite direction. His metal detector moved from Rayhana's long black hair and shoulders, past her waist, and stopped for a few minutes on her big, bare butt. Perhaps the marshal is taking into consideration the case of the Nigerian Muslim terrorist, Omar Al-Farouk, who inserted the explosive device into his ass. After ensuring that the suspected Indian woman had not inserted anything into her body or private parts, he asked her to hand over all her clothes to him. Rayhana sweats like she's in a sauna. She bent her knees, still facing the opposite direction, until her bare big ass rubbed against his erect cock, then picked up her scattered clothes, piece by piece. She is afraid to turn her face towards the angry man. She thought that if she made any wrong move without his permission, he would shoot her naked body with all the bullets in the gun he held in his other hand. The marshal carefully examined Rayhana's clothes before returning them to her. When he finished, she was told to put on her clothes. After she got dressed, the marshal asked her to stay inside the toilet until he returned. Then he locked her inside the small restroom by placing a thick lock on the outside of the door. The Arab marshal was not completely satisfied with what he did to the mother, Rayhana, and then he also carefully examined her daughter. The little girl, Ifit, started crying when she heard her mother, Rayhana, crying inside the small toilet. She thought they wanted to shoot her mother dead. She was not allowed to go to the toilet when they forced her mother to go into the lavatory alone and undressed her completely naked as the day her mother gave birth to her. On that fateful day, the innocent Indian Muslim passenger Rayhana Khan was humiliated after her privacy was violated. She was forced to take off her clothes and expose her private parts. She is a victim of Islamophobia. After the cowardly terrorist attacks of September 11th on the Twin Towers in New York, America, some people considered every Muslim man a terrorist or a Muslim woman, a terrorist and a walking and talking time bomb. After verifying that her young daughter, Ifit Khan, was not a minor Muslim terrorist, the Arab marshal went to the seat of the suicide bomber terrorist mother, Rayhana Khan, and began carefully searching her bag in look of the supposed bomb hidden inside or around her seat. Finally, after all the humiliation, embarrassment, and indignity she had been subjected to, the marshal declared that the Indian Muslim passenger Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifit Khan were not suicide terrorists. If any of the plane's crew or passengers had known that she was the same Indian Muslim maid who was accused in Bombay of the same terrorist charge, they would have thrown her out the door and sent her and her daughter to the sky with the zodiac signs. After that, the Indian passenger Rayhana Khan was released from being confined to the toilet and allowed to return to her seat with her daughter Ifit. Then, and only then, the flight crew began questioning the passenger Rayhana Khan about her Indian passport and the passport of her daughter, Ifit Khan. Once again, the insulted Indian passenger, Rayhana Khan, said that their Indian passports were with the black Negro boy. All members of the plane's crew did not understand Rehana's words, except for one flight attendant. It was the hasty Arab flight attendant who brought her and her daughter onto the plane without passports. She was able to find out what the naive Indian passenger Rehana Khan means by black nigger boy. She told the flight crew where she met the suspected terrorist and her daughter, and who the woman who brought them to her was. However, the Arab air hostess laughed until she held her stomach. And when she somehow managed to speak through her loud laughter, the Arab hostess said that the Indian woman and her daughter thought that the black African Negro woman who had brought them to her was a black Negro boy because the black woman had short hair like a boy and a face like a Negro man who looked like a gorilla in the jungle of Africa. Then the Arab air hostess concluded her racist remark by saying, "The black African Negro woman probably forgot to hand over the Indian passports to them because they were in a hurry." This convincing conclusion of the hasty Arab air hostess solved the mystery of the mysterious disappearance of the passports of the two Indian Muslim passengers, Rehana Khan and her daughter, Ifat Khan. Accordingly, the flight crew members, the captain, his co-pilot, and the armed Saudi marshal felt relieved and no longer worried about the problem of the suspected Muslim terrorist female suicide bomber on board the plane. Shortly thereafter, the giant Saudi jumbo jet landed safely at Jeddah International Airport in the Kingdom of Tartarus, Saudi Arabia.